Koshka to Veins is gonna get melted.
Do I think mobile esports is a phase? No, absolutely not.
And Hack just don't understand what happens.
Hey, and welcome to a new episode of the Halcyon Report. And this week, joined by SuiJeneris and FooJee. Welcome, guys.
Hey, what's up? Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
Yeah, SuiJeneris, good to have you back here after birthday and vacation. So good to have you here to talk about some Vainglory. So I think the first thing, we're recording right after the Vainglory8 happened that NA just finished up, and we got to talk about these the finals between Cloud9 and Hammers. This was a surprising matchup and pretty close game, I guess. To some degree, it did go to 3 games, but let's start it off here with a clip. This clip was from game 2, and it kind of kicked off and allowed us to go back into the game 3. So this was a really good fight between both teams.
Looks like they are.
Oh, they're looking for the jump on right now, and well, Old School already getting just completely annihilated. Burst is going to come down. Gauntlet's going to come down alike as well. Starting all over, it's going to be able to pick up 1 kill, but in the middle of it all, I love Joseph still surviving, trying to kill T-Tuggers, but I'm not sure it's going to be enough damage. There comes the Bright Bulwark once more, but they are going to find Gate Visual as well. Joseph, the only guy left standing for Cloud9. He's going to be able to retreat, not a problem, but Hammers now, they are going to be able to take this Kraken.
So what do you guys think about this, the finals here between these two teams? Did you get a chance to watch them? Any thoughts? Some surprising picks here, especially at the end with this Saw pickup.
Yeah, I know Cloud9 had the right mentality because CP Saw actually counters Fortress, but they countered the CP Saw pick with Kestrel. So it's pretty much a skill matchup. I think Joseph was a little uncomfortable on Saw. They had an early game invade that kind of failed, and then they gave Hammers 2 kills. And then Tigers just carried with that Kestrel, and he did such an amazing job with them on a poke and setting the traps. So that was a very interesting. I wouldn't think that a Fortress with a CP Kestrel comp would work out so well. And of course, they gave starting Ringo, which his win rate on Ringo is insanely high. I think it's like 90+%. I think I've only seen him lose on Ringo like 2 to 3 times. So that was a very interesting last match, and Hammers definitely deserved the win with how well they played their composition. Yeah,
FooJee, this was one of the, I guess, many unconventional picks we saw this weekend with the Saw pickup here at the end. Was you surprised to see this?
Maybe a little bit. I kind of caught glimpses of the finals matchup. I was actually doing a few other things, but you're right. It was we saw a couple of different picks come out today, like Grumpa in North America came out a little earlier than the finals too. So maybe teams testing some things, or at least teams that are feeling confidence with their placement, trying some different strategies out as they head into the future weeks. But I like it to some extent. Like I feel like it's in the scrim environment, you certainly have a specific set of results, and what you hope to find in the actual weekend tournaments sometimes doesn't always end up where you want it. But pretty interesting. It's the first time I would have seen that type of play come out of C9. It wouldn't have been a prescription to their play style that I would have guessed, but the surprise didn't quite work out.
And then Hammers took him down in like about 12 minutes, which is just has to be incredibly sad if you're playing Saw. Like, you're just seeing that happen.
Yeah, it certainly is. Yeah, certainly. Well, I mean, the thing is we actually saw Rogue play at Crystal Power Saw in Jungle yesterday too. The thing about the pick is it's very strong. The damage output on CP Saw is one of the highest in the game, but the execution of the pick is very difficult. It's highly reliant on playing around cooldowns, almost perfect positioning, and making sure everyone is on the same page. And it's just so hard for teams to actually pull the pick off most of the time.
And so that was the finals, and I think it was a little bit of an upset that we didn't see Gangstars and TSM here battling it out again. They ended up battling in the 3rd and 4th place match. But when Gangstars went down and their matchup, and then TSM, it was just, to me, it was a shock. I guess these two teams that have been at the top of the bracket for the last 2 weeks.
A weekend of upsets. TSM played a bit kind of peculiar to I guess maybe trying to all in for their wins, but this is not unlike them, right? Like we've seen this in previous seasons too, where when they solidify themselves in a really good spot, they typically start testing things or trying different things or hiding things as it gets closer to the end of the season. So they probably feel pretty confident. Some of the harder schedules for them have already passed. We saw like the TSM C9 day one matchup last week. So I actually think the Gangstars won too. Just upsets are good though. Like, right. Like I actually kind of like the fact that we saw some different things happen, because it means that now all of a sudden it doesn't feel so stale. It's not like all of these specific teams are the ones that always win and there's just no chance for other teams to make it to the finals. So perhaps a bit of a boost for teams still looking to scrape together some points before the end of the season.
Yeah, SuiJeneris, were you surprised by these, or is it kind of just kind of nice, like FooJee said, a good shakeup?
Yeah, I was definitely surprised, and I like that teams are experimenting, but I feel like a lot of the times when the teams experiment, they're not as comfortable. If you look at CP Saw, Grumpjaw, Ozo picks that are considered to be off meta, those teams normally lost that matchup. But it's great to see, like FooJee said, that it's not stale. It's great to see Hammers, show that Ringo is a top carry still, because as you guys know, Jewel was pretty strong last weekend. And we didn't see as much Jewel today, which is very interesting because Jewel actually works pretty well into Ringo depending on the composition. So it's good to see that when you stick to what you're really comfortable and you're really confident on, you can take it all the way. And Hammers definitely showed that with, starting on Ringo constantly, and that worked out really well for them.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, you mentioned this Grumpjaw, that game too with TSM, that Vein Crystal was down to, I think that was one hit. It had to have been devastating to watch it happen.
Yeah.
If they focused the objective, oh man, they would have won that game, because Chuck actually auto attacked starting a few times and stuff. But if TSM literally just focused the turret and the main, they probably would have won that match. That was so close and so exciting to watch.
Yeah, it really was.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, all these picks, I think that kind of brings us into our next topic with like the drafting phase. I know we've touched on it a little bit on the Halcyon report, but having both FooJee and SuiJeneris here to talk about like kind of what's working and maybe what's not working in the draft. Like we're seeing these healers be these top picks. They either get banned or they both make it through. Like SuiJeneris, I'd love to hear your thoughts on like going into draft and kind of what you're telling your team.
Yeah, and people were mentioning in Twitch and on Twitter that they wish FooJee would get back to analyst this so that someone can break down the draft as it's happening. But A side is considered to be very strong right now compared to B side, because you get to secure a top laner or support, normally Adagio or Lara. Adagio, of course, you can flex, and then or a top jungler like Koshka on A side, and it's very high win rate on A side if you compare it to B side. And if you look at how B drafts normally turn out, Fortress is normally picked on B side. Once the A side takes a healer, Fortress is a good counter to healers because of his Mortal Wound. Immortals and Gangstars try the Taka Fortress combo because it's double Mortal Wound and it counters a heal comp normally. Conceptually, it made sense because the idea is to single target someone with Fortress and Taka and blow them up along with a Ringo or Vox or whatever. However, it didn't work both times for Immortals and Gangsters, actually. So it's sometimes better to maybe CP Jungle for it instead, which worked out for the teams that tried that. Pedo, as you've seen, is a great pick into Glaive. Pedo has won every matchup where it was picked into Glaive, whether it's a support Glaive or a Glaive carry in Jungle. So you can see that on A side, it's really much easier to draft the right composition and take the right supports. It's really a support game. When you think about the draft right now, a lot of the supports are being banned and picked, along with picking a top jungler or laner. But I feel like in this meta, if you get the early game jungler and the early game support, you normally have a much higher chance of winning. So for example, Koshka Ringo. If you give a team Koshka Ringo, you're asking to lose pretty much. along with like Lance or Lyra or Adagio. Those are all extremely strong early game heroes, and that's the reason why they're all being picked. Like Scarf is not being played as much, even though I think Scarf has a lot of potential. Echo Fox actually tried Scarf out. Celeste is not being played a lot because they're all late game, and normally when you pick a late game hero, you have a much higher chance of losing. So that's how draft really breaks down this meta.
FooJee, are you kind of in the same boat? Like mentioned that Scarf pickup, that Echo Fox grab. What was your thought there, or what was like you letting the team know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, what happens on the weekend is what matters. But what people don't really see are scrim results, and like when you're preparing comps and why you're doing certain picks and having certain successes. It all comes down to the weekend, and if you can actually execute. We had actually, you mentioned the Scarf pick specifically. We had actually ran some Scarf renditions of compositions into Koshka comps throughout the prior week leading up to the weekend, and had not just great success, like 100% success. So you could imagine I was feeling pretty bad when we weren't able to quite pull it off versus TSM. But we were talking a bit about drafts and kind of how it pans out. I definitely think that A-side is pretty strong in terms of being able to get the composition that you want based around some of the primary picks in the meta. I certainly don't disagree with that. I think B-side right now, teams are still maybe less willing to experiment in the right direction with things, so sometimes it ends up coming off a little bit more difficult to execute from a draft standpoint. But at the end of the day, I feel like it's still primarily based upon how the teams are playing in game themselves, because even if you get a great draft, if you don't play it correctly, then obviously you still you take the loss anyway. So, but I don't know, like for me, like when I'm helping drafts or preparing or working with the team, I don't particularly care too much about which side we're on. I don't really spend a lot of time thinking about it as much as just making sure that we get, picks that make sense for us and based upon our success throughout the previous weeks.
Yeah, to echo what FooJee is saying, a lot of comps that we've had success with in scrims, like FooJee said, 100% win rate on Scarf, right? A lot of comps that we have success on scrims normally, for some reason, just doesn't translate to the weekend. They'll play a comp that they know they can play and they're comfortable playing, and then all of a sudden it just doesn't work out. And I can definitely echo what FooJee is saying. It's just like, man, what happened? It's kind of think to yourself. It's like,
is that something to do with the nerves or the maybe the pressure of like it's all on the line versus like hanging out on your couch, kind of playing and just trying stuff?
Yeah, it does have something to do with it. I mean, so for my example, it was this whole idea that I actually gave some feedback to the VG8 analyst desk about this, because I think sometimes we spend too much time talking about picks and what players are strong at playing, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of times we miss out on the actual things that cost teams the match. Like if you look at our match against TSM, Koshka got a little bit of an early lead from a mistake that we had made by getting rooted in the jungle by one of the treants. We took the lead back actually, and kind of met them in the middle. But then we face checked one of the bushes after shopping, and we got aced. Like the face check literally took the entire game and threw it back over to TSM. That has nothing to do with draft, at all. But a lot of times I think people are just really quick to forget, or at least not recognize the real reasons why certain matches are going in the favor of one team or the other, because it's super easy to go back and talk about draft being the problem. And I actually think it's really lazy. A lot of times the responsibility isn't being placed where it should be. People don't want to admit that they made mistakes as much as it's like, oh, well, maybe we should have just picked this, or if we would have went that, it would have been easier. Okay, I mean, you could really talk circles around that. But what would be even easier is if you didn't fail the Kraken call, or if you didn't push turret when they were all respawning earlier. There's so many other things I think that could be focused on. But I like a lot of the drafts that are coming out of the teams. I can see the win conditions for a lot of the drafts, even some of the peculiar looking ones. I'm like, okay, I kind of see what they're wanting to do. It's just, can they do it? Can they pull it off? Okay. Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of these, or talked about the Grumpa and maybe TSM and Flash kind of maybe hiding some of their stuff? Do you think they're trying other things just to see what might work and what could work? Maybe they tested these in scrims, and let's just go for it here. We have the points. We're more than likely qualified, so we'd have to lose every game to not make it, kind of idea.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't ever think there's a moment where I feel like at least in 2017, TSM is probably going to try to win every game, even if the draft is not perhaps favorable. Like, there were always questions in the past about like how much effort is being put in, but it's kind of hard to see a team that's really not trying to sweat it out to the very end. That being said, though, you could see like, taking one of these picks, I mean, the tournament environment is the best test environment. If you really want to see how something works under pressure, under nerves, it's a good place to bring something out. If you're in a safe position like TSM is, you can certainly risk it.
That's a good spot to kind of end drafting for now, and kind of brings us into the next topic here. FooJee, so Echo Fox, like, I think these are all players, yourself, we're all very familiar with. I think everyone maybe had extremely high hopes for what was going to happen with this team, and it maybe doesn't seem like they're performing as well as everyone was hoping for. Love to hear your thoughts on, like, is it new team? Is it just kind of the growing pains kind of working together, still kind of getting the kinks out?
So it's a lot of things, most of them not being very public. Like, at least it's hard to perceive what the issues are publicly. Like, when the Echo Fox arrives during the weekend and plays their tournament games, people see a team that has trouble executing. They see a team that's that they kind of think like, wow, like that seemed kind of like not what we've expected you to play, like, or maybe it's like, oh, well, this person's making a lot of mistakes, or a lot of criticism for this player not being aggressive enough, or maybe they're missing out on opportunities that they're not taking. And a lot of the perception is not wrong, especially because we are failing to perform during the weekends. And it's sad for me too. Like, I had a lot of high hopes going into the season, definitely. The team was really, really, really strong, and perhaps first noticeably strong in the end of 2016, before a lot of the major meta shifts came into the game, in terms of like it became a much more early game aggressive. You need to be able to spar, and the first 8 minutes in the jungle are pretty critical. Whereas before, like when the season ended, it was just all about you just kind of rotate and then go to lane, and teams with good pressure, team fighting, those were the teams that did typically succeeded a lot. And that's where, Miko, Delphi, Cole picked up a lot of their momentum. But yeah, this meta has not been too favorable for them. They've had a hard time adjusting to it. And unfortunately, it's not just like there's one person that's not showing up on the weekends right now. Everybody is struggling. Everyone is sharing the responsibility of missed opportunities and mistakes. And it's tough. It's tough to win. Strength of schedule comes up a little bit, but like we played C9 week 1, and then we played TSM this week. Week 2 was kind of the week where I felt like we could have really shown the strength, but we didn't show up. We didn't succeed against Immortals that week. And then, going into week 4, we're up against Hammers, which I would have said maybe during the first couple of weeks, Hammers was a team that didn't look quite so strong, but, they showed up pretty big this weekend. So who really knows? But yeah, it's been a tough road, man. It's been a tough season so far.
Is it hard to be on the outside, like coaching, when do you feel like, I wish I could be out there, I could be better, but do you like that coaching role to step back and kind of analyze and kind of let them shine?
I don't sit here thinking actively about like, if I was there, I could have done better. Actually, most of the thought processes going through my head when I'm watching the team are specifically about like, what could we have done differently in this situation? Just things to reflect a lot more on the players themselves. I mean, when I'm watching them play on the weekends, I'm just as like into it as if I was a player. Like I'm on the edge of my seat, like cheering when we get, a great pick or a great play. And then when we make a mistake, I'm just like, oh no, like what are we doing? Like, why did we, oh my God, like, what do you mean you got rooted? Ugh. Like, if you can't get rooted, it's like, that's bad. Like, you can't do these things. I'm just like, I see it. It's actually maybe even more painful sometimes when you're the coach, because when you're the player and you're in the moment, you know, the feelings are obviously kind of up and down, but when you're seeing it from the bird's eye view, you're just like watching opportunities slip through your fingers, right? You're seeing things that could have happened or should have happened, and you're just like, oh, it's so close. If we could have just like tweaked this team fight just a little bit, if this wouldn't have happened, we were so close to that victory, but the team can't feel it in the moment. You know, when they lose a team fight, it's just like they all feel like so distraught and down because they don't feel the closeness necessarily. They just feel the loss. So
yeah, I can echo that. It's as a coach, it's frustrating watching, especially if you train them or you worked with them like on rotations and stuff on what to do in case you face this situation. A, you respond with B, right? And if team doesn't do that and they've kind of play to the enemy's game and their win condition, you kind of like want to pull your hair out. So it's extremely frustrating to watch from a coach perspective, and I'm sure, you know, all the coaches can echo that. I think along with Immortals and Echo Fire, I think the main thing is the key is the jungler and the laner and the team. If you look at the team fights and look at all the top, like TSM Hammers and Cloud9, their jungler and their laner is extremely good at being very decisive and focusing down the person that they want to take down. If you look at Echo Fox and Immortals and kind of analyze their gameplay, you kind of see the laners and junglers being on a different page sometimes. But when they are on the same page, they really shine. And I think that's the key to a lot of some of the struggles that I see Echo Fox having, the struggles that Immortals is having. So I think that kind of working with that kind of focus and helping the players kind of think and problem solve through a situation that they're facing, especially playing from behind, etc., is going to help these teams out a lot to become a top team, because I think Echo Fox and Immortals have that potential. It's there to be a top 3 team, but they just got to perform and prove it through their results.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, you guys mentioned the patch and how that can affect the players and basically the heroes that are strong. And we may see this next update, the 2.3, kind of come in and kind of really mix things up a little bit. I think there's still one more week that Vainglory8 is played on 2.2, right?
I think so, actually. I actually don't know if this weekend. I feel like it's probably still going to be on the tournament previous patch. But yeah, you're right. I mean, things could change. I think it's so like the desk has actually been giving some feedback, and we've been hearing it a lot in the community. Like, you know, well, maybe the new patch will shift the meta a little bit. We'll see CP laners again, maybe a little bit more often, blah, blah, blah. But like, yes, maybe. But at the end of the day, if like the shot calling isn't there, the decision making isn't there, it doesn't matter who's on what hero. You've got to match at least the minimum level of what your opponent is putting out. And when you're up in jungle against people like, you know, Von C or T Tigers, you know, it's tough. Like I Love Joseph, these are people that are gritty. Like they know what they want to accomplish. They know what they can accomplish, and they're going to try to do it. And 90% of the time they succeed, and 10% of the time they don't. And if your play style is reactionary, if you're kind of just waiting to see what happens, trying to get back with your team, like if you don't have that kind of confidence in executing your own play styles, you're always going to get run over. Like it's just, you have to be superbly 100% convinced that what you're about to do is the right decision. And if you hesitate for a second, the other team takes advantage and you lose. So I definitely don't think it matters as much about what the meta is in terms of actual heroes being played, but teams really just have to step up their individual mechanics and gameplay decisions.
Coming up here, we've got the Challenger Series. The playoffs are about to happen. We've seen some really strong teams kind of emerging. I know on the EU side, we have Fluffy Chickens, Lemon and Lime, and then we have the team that was formerly known as Fnatic Gaming. They've changed their name to something Cobra related. So those teams are looking incredibly strong. So we may see somebody get displaced there. And then on the NA side, we got One Piece and LibX. I don't think they've lost a game yet. And NRG with Hardic, you know, they struggle at times, but they keep bringing it through and kind of coming out. I don't know if you guys have been watching any of these or like keeping an eye on any of these players. I know we keep touching on this because I think there could be some shakeup, at least on one side, EU or NA. Some new team is likely to come in and someone's about to leave. FooJee?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think these are these are all teams to certainly like look out for. The Libx is doing really well. Part of the reason why I think they're succeeding is because status fits kind of the type of jungler you would say this is this type of meta jungler. This is a like Von C / status style of jungling where it's aggressive, it's in your face, it's all about stealing farm away and doing all of the above successfully. So I think it really helps propel Libx in a pretty big way. Obviously, upon the original, a talented player as well as E36, but we'll have to see. Libx, I think, certainly has a really great chance of arriving in the VG8 split too. The other teams, I'm not sure. Like right now, it is a single ban format, so once that transitions into double ban and the strategy deepens a little bit, we'll have to see if they can still bring out comfort picks and comfort solutions to what some of the even lower end on the point scale VG8 teams are doing right now. So it's a bit of we'll have to see if they have what it takes for the long run, but they do certainly look pretty good. I think Energy did lose, I think, to Libx, but they're not out, so they can certainly be back up in the top positions to challenge a team as well at the end of the split.
Yeah, that's a team that definitely Hardik falls back on comfort picks all the time. When he gets them, he shines. I know I have a clip here where Energy was basically between two turrets, and they were on heroes that they seemed to all be comfortable with and juggled double turret aggro and kind of all made it out there alive. So when they perform on the heroes that they get, they do really well. But yeah, like you said, double ban happens. They may not be able to get those heroes anymore. We'll have to see. So this week there was some surprises with Hammers and Cloud9 in the finals. Do you guys have any thoughts on what we might see coming up in this next week? Because this week or the week coming up here kind of decides like who's going to be the bottom 3 teams that may have to face these challenger teams. A lot of points are on the line every weekend. Yeah, SuiJeneris, I know you had some thoughts earlier on what we might see.
Yeah, Echo Fox faced a tough road. I know FooJee knows that they face Hammers, and Hammers really showed up this weekend. So that's going to be I think a close game. But I do see Hammers edging it out unless Echo Fox is, like FooJee said, decisive with their play and being proactive with their shot calls. I think that's what makes Hammers shine. If Echo Fox can out shot call and be more decisive, I think they can beat Hammers. TSM versus Misfits, I definitely see TSM winning that matchup. So Misfits is going to really face a tough road. They do a lot of interesting drafts as well. I think they tried Celeste Jungle, etc. Immortals versus Rogue, that would be the matchup to watch, because if Immortals doesn't win this one, they could potentially be in the bottom 3. Since Rogue does have 2 points, Immortals has 4. So that would be a very interesting matchup to watch. But I do see IMT coming out on top of that. And then Cloud9 versus the Gangstars. I mean, I can't wait for that one, because it'll be a great grudge match. Gabe tweeted today, quote, "We supposedly take down the second best team 2-0 after they beat Gangstars." So that'd be very interesting to see that matchup and that rivalry next Saturday. But I really think it's going to be, again, between TSM, Hammers, and Cloud9 right now, as they are the 3 strongest based on results. We'll see how they'll do with the next patch coming. I don't think it'll be applied to next week. But I do think TSM will kind of lick their wounds, as they always do after a defeat, and come back extremely strong and take week 4 to secure first place for the entire split.
And then FooJee, are you kind of echoing the same thing, or do you have some differing opinions on this?
No, I mean, I feel pretty similar. The Echo Fox versus Hammers matchup, obviously, I'd like to think that we can take the W there. Perhaps something that was strange to me all weekend was I just felt like teams didn't care about the strengths of Hammers. Like, they didn't really draft around what Hammers is really good at. I feel like teams just play to draft, let Hammers have what they want, and that was a pretty big mistake. SuiJe mentioned it earlier. I mean, like, starting on Ringo, right? Like, if you don't draft something that can specifically shut his Ringo down, then I think that's a huge mistake. So at the very least, I think, you know, we'll get drafts and stuff that we'll be strong and excited about. But you know, whether we win or not, of course, comes down to the team. So we'll have to see. Most of the other predictions I think are probably on TSM over Misfits. You know, certainly. Rogue is kind of an interesting team that I feel like they like show up or they don't. Like it's like 50-50. They don't really typically live in an area where you're like, oh, this is going to be like a really tough close match. It's like after game 1, like if Rogue wins, they might win the whole thing. If they lose, unlikely that they make like a reverse sweep. It just depends on whether they're on or not for the day. And then of course, yeah, you know, C9 versus Gangstars should be pretty interesting. This was the first week I think Gangstars ran into a C9 or TSM before finals. So we'll have to see, like, can Gangstars still keep up the like hype? I'm not saying they had like a particularly easy schedule. If not every, like, no team right now I think is easy, quote unquote, to beat. But, you know, definitely, you know, the schedule does favor some of the early split. So we'll have to see, can they come back next week and, you know, can Gangstars get revenge on C9, or does C9, you know, win another 2-0 or something like that? So still a lot up in the air.
Well, we're going to have to wait and see what predictions come true. But that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Halcyon Report. FooJee and SuiJeneris, thank you for joining me and talking through all this.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate the invite.